right. Hello. Welcome, everybody. Can I just check the audio? I'm on a different microphone today than usual. So just if someone can tell me in the chat that it's sounding okay. Morning, Aled. How you doing? Sorry about yesterday. Excellent. Okay. If anything happens to that or internet or anything, I will be back. I'm in a hotel at the moment, so you know what that can be like. So hopefully we're all good. And thank you again for joining me. We will get started basically. So today is about the relationship generation system, which is a system. And to me, system is a combination of people, process, and technology that we have developed and refined. You know, it's sort of an evolution of everything, really, but it combines old school relationship driven business development with online marketing tactics. And so that you can actually really get the best of both worlds without having to sell your soul to ickiness and misalignment, as I say. So presentation is not beginning shortly. It is beginning now. So for those that don't know me, quite a few people on this call do know me. So I won't spend too long on this slide, but if you want to pause or screenshot or have a look at it later, this is really just to make sure that you know that I know what I'm talking about, which will hopefully become apparent. So I don't need to spend too much time on this. The one thing I do want to spend some time on is I have done it both ways. So if you think of things as a spectrum from full-on internet marketer, which we'll get into, you know, the pros and cons of that, and full-on like relationship-driven old school business development, I've done both extremes. And as is usually the case in life with any kind of extreme, there's a reason it's called an extreme. And it has good things, but it also has bad things about it. And what I've found is a lot of people, perhaps you, have historically done or are continuing to do the old school business development and get lured in, get, you know, shiny object syndrome, whatever you want to call it, by online marketing and the ease with which other people appear to be doing that. And this is really about a warning sign about going too far in either direction. You can't sit and do nothing because that's probably why you're here interested in growing your business. You also, from my direct experience, at least, you can't go full on internet marketer. There's a bunch of reasons that that doesn't work. And almost every program coach, consultant, an agency out there assumes this. And from my perspective, that's part of the problem. So I've done it both ways, and now I'm working in the middle, and at the happy middle, as I would refer to it. So, all right, without talking about me, let's talk about the rules of the game. Not really rules of the game. We will go for about 90 minutes, could be less, but last time I said 60 and it was more, so I just bumped it up. There will be a recording sent out. I love questions, so please, if you can, put them in the Q&A. This is a Zoom webinar, so that the Q&A exists, helps me manage things, especially on relatively small screens. And there will be no hard pitches. This is not one of those Russell Brunson perfect webinars where I psychologically manipulate you for however long it takes and has about 5 minutes of content in it. This doesn't even have 5 minutes of pitch in it. In fact, it has about 30 seconds, which is just simply, hey, if you'd like us to do this for you, let's have a chat. Like, there you go. There's the pitch. So my primary goal is to help you realize a perspective shift. That's what I like to do in these things, in how to reconcile those two seemingly disparate worlds of the full-on internet marketer and the full-on traditional business development. So hopefully you get some aha type moment. I'd be very curious if you do, and feel free to reach out and let me know what that was. My secondary goal is to actually show you our system at a sort of process and a tactical level. So I'm not going to go super deep on that for a bunch of reasons. One is time, and the other is almost everybody is not actually going to be interested in doing it themselves. But I do want to highlight the sort of important elements of the internet marketing world combined with the old school business development world. So, all right, this is my primary framework. Really, it's our philosophy, and it underpins everything I do. It's not directly related to anything and simultaneously directly related to everything. So the triple profits framework is about most people, obviously, looking at the red bit, looking at money. That's what most people think of when they think about profitability. And there's two others from my perspective. There's time, which is a little bit more obvious. You're like, yeah, well, okay, while making money, am I going to spend more time doing it? Maybe that's not as desirable as spending the same or less. But there's also energy, and this is a big one. And I'm sure the woo-woo people in the audience had many clients in that category. Namaste. And But this can be as simple as whether it brings you joy or sucks the living life out of you. And I don't know about you, but I've got lots of activities historically that I've done that have been in the latter camp. And so part of my commitment in everything that we're doing and everything that I'm doing for myself, don't always get it right, but my commitment is to triple profitability. So if I'm going to be generating money, generating profit at the expense of time and energy, that's like a double whammy. If I'm going to be temporarily investing a bunch of time in order to make money, I'm going to be looking at that and go, okay, like, is that actually temporary? Is it still going to like maintain or enhance my energy? Like, because sometimes, like, I'm an ADHD person, so I like to go deep. I like to hyper focus. So you might say, yeah, I'm going to like not sleep for a week and just do this thing, and that's going to compromise my time. That might be okay temporarily, as long, and that type of thing for someone with that kind of brain, for example, can actually bring energy. Like, it's really exciting, it's something like, it feels like this major achievement. Okay, so this is a very personal thing, and it's very simple. I just want you to reflect on the activities that you are doing in your business. Obviously everybody is or almost everybody is trying to achieve this top one, right? So I don't really need to talk about it, although what we're going to go through today is a high leverage way of enhancing that, but it's really baking in the other two. So what I have done and what I continue to do, for example, I used to do some appointment setting for one of our offers, and it was working, but at the cost of time and energy. So I killed it and I've changed it. We now do what we're doing here, actually. That was one of the reasons this exists. Is because this approach, for me at least, and maybe for you, but it brings me energy. Like, I find this kind of thing really engaging. I find the conversations that happen before and after this kind of thing really engaging and uplifting, because I'm not dealing with people who are like, who are you? What are you doing? I don't have to psychologically manipulate them, hard sell them, put offers out that are just like ridiculously over the top in terms of guarantees and all this sort of stuff. So all of that stuff I've done, and it works, but only if you're looking at it through one perspective. So that's what we're doing here, and that's built into everything we do. So you might be curious, relationship generation. That's a phrase that I developed, particularly in contrast to lead generation. So relationship generation is a business development methodology that prioritizes building authentic, trust-based relationships over transactional lead generation. So instead of chasing volume-based outreach or one-off sales, it focuses on creating meaningful connections with the right people. Those who are in market means they could potentially benefit from what you're offering. They're interested means they are interested in something, maybe not working with you, but at least interested in solving this problem or exploiting this opportunity right now, and responsive. So when you are going out to people, there's a very high chance that they actually literally just respond. So the business development opportunities emerge naturally over time, as opposed to a funnel is really the alternative. And we'll get into that, but the most obvious sort of version is that linear kind of and very leaky funnel where it's like lead, say for something like this, it'd be lead, registration, then show up, then saw the pitch, then booked a call, then closed. Like that's linear. That's how most sort of marketing systems and client acquisition systems are set up. And the dirty secret behind them is that's not actually how most sales are made, even by the people that do it that way. So this approach blends outbound marketing with relationship-driven business development, allowing for a best of both worlds scenario. So I call it, instead of like a funnel and lead generation and lead conversion, that kind of stuff, because that to me inherently focuses on a transactional relationship. Now, what usually happens is once they become a client, the relationship kind of switches. And if you do a good sort of ethical sales enrollment process, following, say, Jay Abraham's strategy of preeminence or other approaches that are not psychologically manipulative, but are really an approach of leadership and sales as leadership, then from that point onwards, you might be treating people as a relationship, but your marketing to get people to that point is usually not done that way, unless you are doing it all manually yourself, somewhat ad hoc and chaotically, usually, at least in my previous experience of what I did. So the framework instead that I prefer is connection, conversation, collaboration. Many people, if they were going to say this, would say connection, conversation, conversion. That's not my goal. And you'll see that today. It's why this has not got 15 minutes of hard pitch and over the top guarantees and, bonus stacks and all this kind of crap, because that's a pitch. That's optimizing for conversion. If you instead optimize for collaboration, as we'll see with some examples shortly, you get the conversion as a natural byproduct of the collaboration, but the energy flow associated with it is very different. So all of this is about positive and mutual and reciprocal energy rather than like a taking kind of energy, which is sort of inherent in any kind of pitch. So why would you want to do this? It's, in my opinion, the antidote to what a lot of people have probably been on the receiving end of, and a lot of people are sort of shouting at you. That's what I call a lot of marketing, shouting at you. Outdated high-pressure sales tactics and the endless hustle of lead generation. So instead of treating prospects like transactions, it treats them like future clients, referrers, or long-term business allies, advocates. I've got a slide outlining the way I categorize it shortly. And it creates trust, goodwill, and sustainable growth. This approach works because it blends outbound marketing with relationship-driven selling, meaning, this is really important, you only talk to people who are interested and in market. Like everything I'm talking about today, anything where I say this is a good idea is literally everything is because I've done it a different way that was a bad idea. So you only talk to people who are interested in market. Well, the opposite of that is I've talked to a lot of people who are not in market and are in market or not interested for various reasons. And that's inefficient. And when something like that is really inefficient, I also find it an energetic drain personally. And it takes up a lot of time, which has a huge opportunity cost. And the more time that takes, the more energy that detracts. Some people love it. We'll get to that in a minute. You avoid the ickiness of self-promotion while growing your business. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. You don't need this. This to me is the number one point. You don't need to become an expert marketer or run a complicated funnel in order to pull this off. You don't need any funnel at all. You'll just see the approach that we take is a little bit more efficient than just spray and pray. But it is principally a philosophy and a strategy, and then tactics. You can use any tactics, any channel, any lead generation type approach that can fit within this philosophically. But what I find in the market is the vast majority of people are, again, shouting from the rooftops, shouting at you, trying to convince you that you're inadequate and that you need to become a marketing expert. So that's one element, all the coaching, the consulting, the programs around this. And I've done that. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and many thousand hours, learning some of this stuff. And that's fine because I work in marketing, but you probably don't work in marketing. You probably work in something else, and marketing is a means to an end. And so having to spend that kind of time and money and suck for so long before you get half good at it, let alone really good at it, that's a very long road. It's like saying, okay, well, I'm going to go and I need surgery. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to med school, then I'm going to get my residency, and then I'm going to do my specialist crap. And then I can operate on myself. Like, this is insane. The problem is in this sort of world of agencies, if you don't do that, and this is probably your experience as well, most agencies suck, I think is a fairly controversial statement. And the reason they suck is not because the agency suck. This is what everybody thinks. So I view it as a red flag if someone's sort of running around saying, oh, I've worked with, 6 different agencies and they all sucked. It's like, interesting. Yes, they do generally. And I run an agency. So yeah, we would suck some of the time. And the difference a lot of the time, is the big if we were not preeminent in who we actually let into the agency. And the reason is statistically, most people are not ready. I've consulted with a lot of agencies. I've had at least 50 agencies as my clients over the years. And the number one problem, most of them, not all of them, but the number one, they fall into 2 buckets. Some agencies simply have an operational problem. They're the like really good agencies because it's like you got to do a lot of work for people. It's different, yada, yada, yada. That's irrelevant. Most agencies have a client retention problem. And the reason they have a client retention problem is not because they're no good at Facebook ads, for example. This is a very common sort of agency model. It's because they let people in who are not ready for Facebook ads. They're either not ready budget-wise, but usually it's almost all the time, they're not ready in terms of their offer and their sales process. So they let people in, but then they do their work. And in fact, there's one sort of very well-known person in the agency space who's like, your job is just to do your thing, like your Facebook ads. It's not your problem if the client benefits or not from that, which is obviously total horseshit. But a lot of people act that way, even if they're really great with client conversations, even if they're really well intentioned, they just let pretty much anybody with a pulse and an Amex in. And this is a huge problem. But it's also a huge problem for that agency if they don't do that. Because again, statistically, from the data that I've looked at, they need to turn away about 9 out of 10 clients. And so that's a whole nother topic. But in that kind of environment, that's probably what you've experienced. Like maybe, so, statistically 1 out of 10 agencies would work out in that kind of way. But the problem for them is their business model breaks if they actually do that. And most of them don't have the self-awareness that this is actually a problem. And so this creates this enormous problem where on your side, in order to effectively work with most agencies, you actually need to become a marketing expert. Then you can overcome that gap between the service and sort of scope of responsibility that they are providing and what you actually need. For example, in the offer, in the funnel, in the sales process, like everything else other than traffic, because most agencies are simply focused on traffic, but traffic is only one piece of the pie. So as they start to generate traffic, which now this is, to be fair, most of them do, like most of them don't suck at doing the actual thing of generating traffic. It's just they suck at getting results from that traffic. And that's most of them either consciously or subconsciously, knowingly or unknowingly it's on your shoulders. And it's just good to know this, because if you like, whenever I work with other agencies or service providers, and I do, because often I'm testing different things, or like, for example, I don't know the first thing about TikTok. So if I wanted to use TikTok as an acquisition channel, which I'm not doing, but if I did, I would absolutely hire someone to do that, because it's like much more efficient than me trying to figure it out myself. But whenever I've done that in the past, different tactical processes usually of late anyway, because I know the strategy. Every single one of them, without doubt, has said you're like the best client I've ever had, and your onboarding is the most complete. Like, some of them have said, can I borrow that and like use it as a template to give other clients? I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. That's because I know what I'm doing, but I need to know what I'm doing in order to benefit from that kind of service. And that's the part that most of them don't tell you. They do tell me because they bitch and moan about clients to me in the background and all of this sort of stuff. So anyway, I spent a bit of time on that because that's a really important point. Whether people are explicitly telling you to become a marketing expert or your learned and lived experience, you realize you need to become one. This is not the case here. And so this point is the number one reason why I created this. I've spent years and hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to get to the right point where my clients did not need to become marketing experts. And conversely, from my side, I didn't need to simply do everything for them, because that's so expensive. Most people, under 7 figures can't afford it. That's the other problem. So when you go to like a full service agency, like your big brand and all those kind of agencies, you can overcome this problem. But you spend an absolute fortune. Like, it's completely unaffordable for small business. But that is what larger business do as well. Anyway, the other point, very quickly, you prioritize efficiency and stability. Scalability, I was going to say. That's sort of an interesting made-up word. I might use that later. Rather than endless prospecting. So that's the other thing that happens with the linear funnel, is you constantly need new people, because we'll see in a minute, almost everybody ghosts you. So we've got some core principles behind relationship generation. One is we do use, and this is part of the magic, and maybe something you'll be going, hang on a minute, what are we doing here? We do use bulk or automated outreach. I'll show you how tactically soon, but we do this, and this is part of the hybrid. The difference is we do this in the beginning of the funnel, if you want to think of it that way, and then we stop. That's the point at which we stop is really important. We'll see that in a minute. The friendly ask approach. What does this mean? Most offers, and I don't mean that in terms of like a pitch for your product. I just mean, would you like this Would you like this PDF? Would you like this thing? Many of them are not really friendly ask. And so if you are making like a cold pitch, it's really hard to go back to the same person and make that pitch again. There's only so many times you can do that before people get really, really annoyed. The next one, and we'll go through all of these, but this is just like the core principles behind it. Market responsive manual engagement. So that means prioritizing those who show responsiveness and interest. So it's ensuring your time is spent on the right people. So you can probably start to build a picture here that we are still using like a lot of the old school relationship driven approaches, but what we're using is automation and marketing and lead generation principles in front of that, so that the time we spend doing the old school way is way more efficient than without that sort of front piece. So that's you'll see this diagrammatically soon. That's how we get a best of both worlds. Value first interactions. That means positioning every touch point as an opportunity to help, educate, or support rather than to sell. Selling will happen as a natural byproduct. And a quick sidebar on this doesn't mean be afraid of sales. This doesn't mean don't offer sales calls, this kind of thing. Just do it in a slightly different way. And one of the principles that I live by is Jay Abraham's strategy of preeminence. And something that he says as part of explaining that is most people worry about not overselling a prospect, but you also want to worry about not underselling them. So a great example that I always give, if someone is coming on and they're like, oh, I don't quite have the money for the coaching program. Have you got a course? But this person has just said they've bought $100,000 of courses, 80 grand of which are sitting in their password manager and they haven't even really logged in and watched the first video. My argument would be it would not be preeminent to sell that person a course, because the very likely outcome of that is it's going to sit on that same digital shelf. And so even though it may be cheaper, it has likely no value to that person. Whereas the more expensive coaching program that includes accountability would be of value. So that'd be an example where in that context, I would either refuse to sell them the $2,000 course, or I would push really hard on that point to make sure that they were committed and aware and all that sort of stuff. And I would challenge their assumption that they're actually going to go through with it. And so that's an example of not underselling someone. So most people look at this stuff in terms of their perspective. It's like, oh, this is great. I got an offer and then I got a downsell and I got an upsell and a cross sell and a continuity offer and a blah, 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 blah. And it's all inherently self and ego driven rather than working backwards from the preeminent approach of what the client actually needs. So we do that not just in the sales process, but in everything in terms of marketing and content as well. We also leverage data-driven feedback loops. This is really critical because most, if not all, like you'll be very lucky if the first thing you do in terms of marketing actually works. So we need to continually refine it based on real-world responses, both to improve effectiveness and efficiency. So it's not that hard to get something to be effective. It might be one iteration, it might be two or three. That's sort of typically how things happen. But to make something really efficient, that's a never-ending thing that can go on. And so there's a threshold of efficiency that you sort of need to make the numbers work. And again, that's not that hard to reach usually, but that doesn't mean you stop, because it's always worth, in my opinion, making things more efficient. And that's the last point. The entire approach is designed to be as efficient on your time as possible. So I referred to old school business development. Here's what's good about it. And you can probably guess we're going to be taking the good part and ditching the bad part. So the good part is it works really, really well. This is why people do it. This is why I did it. My first 7-figure business was built entirely this way. When I played with Google Ads in 2010, and I didn't even know what a funnel was. So if I didn't know what it was, I certainly didn't have one. And I just sent Google ad traffic to my homepage because I didn't know any better. And it was a fairly unmitigated disaster. And so that was sort of my only real foray at any kind of attempt of paid or lead generation focused marketing. Everything else was manual outreach and relationship building and referrals and networks and all that kind of thing. And it works really, really well. When it's done right, this approach consistently generates high quality clients and referrals. It builds genuine relationships. So the connections you form aren't just transactional. They extend beyond a single deal or even your current business. So I've got a lot of business over the years in this category where you've met someone, you've done the right thing by someone, you've helped someone, even if they were never a client or vice versa. And then of course, some other opportunity happens. This is the benefit of like genuine networking. And I'm sure all of you have experienced that. It leverages your strengths. So if you're already great at serving clients, my guess is you probably are, then this approach naturally extends those same skills, that same energy, those same skills, that same presence to prospects and leads. That's a real advantage because you don't need to put on a persona of being a salesperson and being convincing and having to do something different and show up differently and do things tactically, like frankly manipulate people. That's my shorthand for most sales tactics. And you don't need to do that. So, or same thing with these kind of presentations. You don't need to become some, master showman. Uh, and there's a lot of people out there teaching these kind of things. I've been through some of that training and I've actually thrown a lot of it away because I don't like to manipulate people. We could talk about that as another sidebar. But yeah, what I found when clients are in a position, because I've worked with over 500 clients over my time, if you get clients, most clients, if you get them to do things that energetically are out of alignment or feel icky in some way, they will not do them. Even if they do them, they will not succeed with them because the energy is so far off. We could get all metaphysical and say that they fail to attract the relevant vibration to who they are, but it just doesn't work. It's as simple as that, and they end up sabotaging it and blowing it up, and then moving on and doing something else. So it's really good to do this, and it's also great for It's great for client lifetime value. You get stronger relationships, so it means better retention, more upsells, and more consistent referrals. One of the quick sidebar, I have ADHD, so you get sidebars. They're fun little side quests, as some people call them. But I like to think of client lifetime value not just in terms of what does an individual client pay you over time, which is the traditional definition, but also factor in what do the people they refer pay you over time. If you can get on average every client to refer you one extra client or more, you have a viral coefficient of referral. So if every client refers you two people, then you have an exponential, 1, 2, 4, 8, and so on. Very few people have that, but it is it's not easy, but it is relatively simple to get a viral coefficient above 1. And the higher it is above 1, the faster that exponential curve is. So that's just something really important. And so when we talk about more referrals, that's a really relevant factor to referral included. I should come up with a term for it. Add more letters to the acronym. There's less reliance on paid ads or algorithms. So your business isn't at the mercy of changing social media trends or ad platform policies. I still have a banned Facebook account because I'm caught in some perpetual loop. I didn't do anything wrong. It's just except Facebook thinks I don't exist or something. Like it's some ID related thing, and I've spent hours and hours trying to deal with it, and it's just like, I don't care anymore. I do actually still test some advertising using someone else's account, and it's on my team, and it's like it's all fine. But yeah, that's if you're overly reliant on that, like too bad. Let alone the costs and all these things that you can't control. Trust accelerates sales. So when trust is built early, there's less need for heavy persuasion, price negotiation, or long sales cycles. You end up with better clients. So by starting the business relationship with, well, a relationship, that's why we call it a business relationship, you naturally set the tone for working with them as a client as well. So one of the big problems in the internet marketing space, and I've worked behind the scenes as well in client success and being privy to some data around some client success audits of some of the big names in the space. What often happens is the disconnect between sales and client success or delivery in the consulting world. The expectations that are set, even if they're not like overly explicit expectations in the conversation, but just the energy associated with it, if people feel or were manipulated into a decision, that flows through into when they're a client. And so you end up with these huge problems that affect everything, even when things appear to be working. And it's because of that disconnecting approach where the sales department is taking one approach and you or your team are taking another approach. So it's also more fulfilling. So many people find this type of business development more enjoyable and aligned with their values than transactional selling. However, obviously it's time intensive. So building relationships takes longer than blasting out cold emails or running ads, right? Or spraying and praying and all that sort of stuff. It relies. These two are the big one. Time intensive, and it's especially time intensive for you personally. So if you like, I don't know, I doubt there's anybody in this call that has or can justify a multi-$100,000 a year business development manager and have them take sufficient responsibility. And I've done this multiple times, and it was an unmitigated disaster every single time. So maybe someone else out there, maybe they've got some great program where it's like, oh, we're going to help you train and recruit and manage and be successful with a business development manager. That person is not me. I can do it myself. I'm very successful at doing it myself. But every time I've tried to delegate it, I've still ended up spending almost as much time on it myself anyway, in managing them and working with them and making sure that they're vaguely doing the right thing. And they have not performed for a whole myriad of reasons. But also, you would need absolute minimum. You would need to be $1 million a year business, realistically 2 or 3, before this economically makes any sense in terms of the OTE, the on target earnings that type of person would need to drive. And similarly, like, okay, well, maybe you don't need to hire someone full time. Maybe you can get some kind of agency to do it. Good luck with that. Good luck getting an agency to build relationships. It's a big enough risk if you have an employee building, or a contractor or whoever building relationships, because there's a significant potential that those relationships can walk when the employee does. So the only way this tends to really work in smaller businesses under a couple of $1 million a year is when you have multiple business partners and one of the business partners does this as basically their full-time job. That's fine, by the way. But most people, like, if you try to do it and then you end up in the consultant's trap, which is you have the time to generate the business or the time to do the business, but not both properly or well or sustainably, and you end up with this yo-yoing revenue because it's like, oh, I don't have projects at the moment. So this is more relevant to big sort of project-driven things, but it's still the same with smaller, programs and that kind of thing. Oh, I need some more clients. You go off and you spend your time doing that. You get the clients. Oh, now I'm spending time on the clients. Oh, wait, what happened? And you just yo-yoing between these two things, and it's really stressful. So we don't really like that very much. And so it's hard to scale traditionally as well. So unlike automated or volume-based lead generation, this is based on people. And people are inherently harder to scale. And this particular type of person is extremely expensive and risky in terms of outcomes. You often end up with longer sales cycles. So, because not every relationship turns into a client quickly or at all, and some take months or even years to convert. And one of the reasons for this is in terms of the buyer cycle and where you are contacting people in that cycle. So as we'll see with our relationship-driven approach in a minute, in terms of the details, by contacting people that are closer to the pointy end of the sales cycle. So this is being in market and responsive and interested. If we get those people and we focus our relationship building efforts on those people, we shorten sales cycles. And it's not because the sales cycle is actually shorter. It's because we're not including the people that have the longer cycle. And that's just an efficiency measure, statistically anyway. So it's difficult to measure the return on investment directly here. So unlike ads, you can track every click and conversion, well, notwithstanding ATT. Anyway, advertising people know what that means. The impact of relationship building isn't always immediate or easy to quantify. It can be exhausting, especially if you don't set boundaries. You might end up spending too much time in conversations that don't lead anywhere. And because you're trying not to be transactional about it, it can feel really icky in terms of, how do I get out of this? How do I sort of shift my time to be focusing on more higher yield opportunities? So it can result in a lot of wasted effort as well, because obviously statistically, most of these potential relationships don't lead anywhere. And so the more people you come across, there's this depth versus breadth kind of thing. And if you take an approach of old school business development and you're too broad, you're not actually building relationships, because relationships rely on some kind of depth. So that's sort of the pros and cons of that approach. So our approach is relationship generation. And so we focus on that we focus on generating relationships. That's why it's called relationship generation rather than lead generation, which focuses on generating leads. So instead of just collecting leads, our system nurtures long-term relationships that yield higher conversions, better retention, and more referrals. And again, you'll see the tactics in the second part of this. It's simple to execute. So this approach balances automation with human connection, so it makes it straightforward to implement. You're probably still going to want us to do it or someone on your team to do it, but you certainly can do it yourself, and it's a whole lot more efficient than the version that I just showed you. You also get 80-20 efficiency with easy delegation. There is a pro and a con to this. The 80% is relatively easy to delegate, which is the relationship generation component. The relationship consummation process, we do not delegate. That's one of the key insights. You should do that. So you do need to spend some time doing this. But by using outbound marketing to pre-qualify leads, the system ensures that those efforts are high impact efforts and allows delegation of the majority of the work and the majority of the time without losing the personalization and the personal connection, which is really critical to making this work. So essentially we're going 80% of the way to the old school business development approach, but with 20% of the effort. That's one way of looking at it. So you get a best of both worlds, which we've talked about before. A friendly ask ensures that outreach doesn't come across as pushy or transactional. From a practical perspective, this means you can go back to the same people, whether they're in your existing audience or new audience, with another friendly ask. So an invitation to an event like this, in my opinion, is a friendly ask, as opposed to, do you want to hop on a sales call or, can I pitch you some shit? Which is what most people are doing on here. So the friendly art, and there's other ways of doing it. I have things called value calls, and I use market research calls, and there's lots of different ways of having friendly asks. There's also like ways of giving time away for free, and a lot of this depends where you're at in terms of your journey, and do you have more time or more money, and how big is your audience. But for a lot of people, they do at some point have an audience size problem if they use traditional sort of funnel-driven approaches, because as we'll see in a minute, the funnel-driven approaches are inherently leaky. If your system is efficient enough and if your target market is large enough, you can get away with it. Doesn't mean you want to. There's some problems with that, but you can. But the smaller your target audience is, the less you want to churn and burn people, as whether they're leads or prospects. We talked about triple profitability right at the beginning. And it's designed for trust-based businesses. So this is ideal for professionals who rely on trust, which is probably you, coaches, consultants, service providers, rather than one-off sales. It's also a multi-channel approach that has single-channel efficiency, as you'll see in a minute. So the way we do it, it's not the only way of doing it, but we engage prospects through LinkedIn, email, SMS, and social media content while maintaining the efficiency of a streamlined process, which is essentially funneling, in the traditional sense of that word, everybody into the same kind of thing. You can do that with other approaches, but there's a lot of caveats on that. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic. We, again, use data-driven feedback loops. This is particularly relevant to the targeting and the messaging in the beginning. That's what's going to determine the responsiveness and the percentage of people that are actually in market, those two things. So those two things, the targeting, usually you end up dialing that in really quickly. Our team's pretty good at it, so we usually get that pretty right first go. The messaging is always a refinement. Like, some people come to us with like proven messaging already. A lot of people don't. So we obviously have to test and develop that. But the targeting usually needs to change, because where you initially target, you start running out of audience. And then you have to think, okay, well, how do I define this audience in a different way? Where do I find these people, in a different place? So that kind of thing. And then we also leverage the data-driven feedback loops from the actual conversations that you happen, which is like quantitative and qualitative feedback. So is this approach for you? Well, if you're still here, which in terms of numbers, every single person that started 5 minutes in is here, so we may have had some fresh blood, but that probably means it is relevant for you. So you're great with clients and you want to extend that strength to prospects and leads as well. So you already deliver high value to clients. And like we talked about before, we want to apply the same mindset to prospects, making sales feel natural rather than forced. You dislike, which is the opposite of this, is like you dislike pushy sales and self-promotion. But a lot of sales trainers are essentially teaching this. Again, everything I've talked about so far that is like an undesirable way of doing things, I've done it. So at least for me, I don't like it. I don't really like being self-promotion-y. I don't really like closing deals, like always be closing, you know, that phrase. It is a great movie scene. But yeah, I freaking hate it. Like if you're selling a commodity, that's fine. If you're ripping people off like Jordan Belfort at the time, that's fine. You do you. I don't agree with it, but like yeah, go sales bros. Everybody else, that feels gross. So to me, it's always be preeminent. But that's a little sidebar rant. So you also want to generate business solo without a sales team. This is tactical, but there are huge implications to having a sales team. It's almost like bringing on a venture capitalist, if you know anything about that world. Once you do that, you are committed to a growth path, and if you try to get off that growth path, you lose all your money. That's essentially how the venture capital model works from the perspective of a founder. So if you're on that hockey stick venture capital growth path, great. And there's obviously a lot in terms of public perception of success, statistically, not so much, but you know, the people like your Mark Zuckerbergs and everybody, it's like, oh, that's amazing. They did that, blah, 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 blah. Along the way, there are the dead corpses of all the people that fell off that. Even if the business itself made money, the founder didn't. So this is very similar in that you need to feed the beast. So in venture capitalists, you got to feed the venture capitalists, you know, economic need for outsized returns because of the probability of outcomes within their venture fund. Here, you need to feed the beast of your performance-driven sales team. So just as a very real example, in my first seven-figure business, I hired a guy, his base salary was 150,000 a year, plus I probably spent another 50 on costs related to travel and meetings and technology and all that sort of stuff. And so that's before we get to the bonuses. So his target was to earn 300 to 400,000 a year, which is not uncommon. This was a decade ago as well. So depending on the industry, some people want to earn more than that. But as I said, the business was only doing about $1 million at that time. So the 200 grand that it was costing me was eating up almost all of the profit. And in fact, because he didn't produce at all, it sent me into a pile of debt. But even if it had worked, I was going to need to generate at least $1 million of extra business every year in order just to be like vaguely break even on the cost of this, because this was an expensive done for you service with high costs. So my strategy there was actually one of two things. It was, okay, I'm committed to adding at least $1 million this year and at least $1 million next year. So I'm going like 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 million, something like that. It's like, okay, so one of two things will happen. I'll either keep up operationally or I won't. And if I don't, I'll sack this guy and then I'll start making money because I had really great client retention. So it's like, it didn't really matter. Like, I'm like, okay, I can break even for 12 months. I'm going to keep these clients for like 7 years on average, something like that. So it's okay. So that's a problem if you can't cope with that level of growth, which I suspect most of you can't. So that's something to consider as well. It's also a totally different energy managing salespeople. If you have not managed salespeople before, you are probably going to hate your life if you do. At least that's what I found. So anyway, I don't think that's relevant to most people, but I just sort of want to indicate the converse. If you want to have a conversation, if you're thinking about hiring a sales team, feel free to just pick my brains because, if it's the right thing for you, I'll tell you. But if it's not the right thing for you, I'll let you know as well. You're not a marketer and you don't want to be. So we talked about this. We don't require complicated funnels, ads, marketing gimmicks. It's built for people who care about results, not marketing hacks. You value efficiency and stability over constant hustle. So it's designed for long-term predictable growth, not burning out and chasing leads. So alternatively, who is this not a good approach for? So if you are a hustle bro and you love sales calls and you love outreach and you love all this sort of stuff, don't know why you're listening here. If the idea of spending all day on calls, grinding out sales, building a high pressure sales machine, like that actually, it legitimately excites some people. Some people. Doesn't legitimately excite me. I thought it did, and then I did it, and it didn't excite me. And people who want to become expert marketers. So if you want to become an expert marketer and learn paid traffic and do low ticket courses and become really great at copywriting and all these kind of tactics, just a small warning, if you're not already close to this, going to cost you years, thousands of hours, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Just be prepared for that. But some people do, and that's fine. Or some people are already there, and it's like, yeah, no, actually, I'm just going to keep going on this funnel-driven approach, and I'm going to do low ticket and ascension and all that sort of stuff. Like in some ways, that is a holy grail. Like I'm actually testing that now in terms of low ticket product ascension because it's got a lot of benefits. It's just the skill required to pull that off is very much higher than you think it is, especially in this day and age. And what happens a lot is people that have succeeded with this stuff, they succeeded in the past at a time that is no longer relevant in terms of ad cost and market sophistication. So that is a small problem. And anyone who wants to hide behind a screen and avoid talking to people, if you're a coach or consultant, that's pretty unlikely to be you. But there are some people like that who are fine, like really introverted, fine when they're talking to clients, but like seize up when they're talking to prospects or seize up in a group like this. You're going to really struggle if that's the kind of thing. So if that is you, you might want to consider a more marketing oriented approach rather than a relationship oriented approach. I'm just going to get some water and then I will come back. All right. So lead generation focuses on capturing leads, often through high volume outreach automation, short term sales cycles. As I said, it's an inherently linear and lossy process. So, what does that look like? Like you all know lead generation, but just to use an example, perfect webinar. Many people know this. It's in .com secrets. It's referenced in Expert Secrets, Russell Brunson, ClickFunnels. A lot of people have copied this. This is one of those things where if you're really good at marketing and you're really good at persuasion, manipulating people, but we'll be generous and call it persuasion. You can pull this off. So Russell in his book says in order to pull this off, you should basically do this and practice this every week for a year in order to get good enough at it. Really? So the reason is the threshold, and this is especially true these days, like 10 years ago plus, 10, 15 years ago when this sort of stuff was a little bit newer, there's like it worked better because people were less familiar with it. And so as people become more familiar with a tactic, especially a manipulation-based tactic, the threshold of quality is an interesting word in this concept of manipulation, but the threshold of how good you need to be tactically goes up and up and up. This is what's happening with ads, for example, and it's what's happening with pretty much most of these conversion-oriented things, which is why it's so difficult for people and why people are jumping between different things is the bar is so high. The bar didn't used to be as high. So anyway, we'll talk through this as a worked example. So this is what typically happens in lead generation. I have done, I don't know, 50, 100, something like that of these things. That's just for me, let alone for clients, with historically with some kind of webinar funnel like this. So let's say we have 100 registrants. We got to the point where about 35 would show up, started at about 20. We did a bunch of things, made it about 35. 28 of them would stay sort of statistically. Right now, we're running at a higher ratio than that. And then of those, anywhere from 0 to 20% would book a call. I'm being a bit conservative in every number that I talk about. So let's say 3 book a call, 1 close, $10,000 offer. So it's costing you 100 per registrant. Like that's, you're generating 100 per registrant, not cost, sorry. And yeah, okay, so that's fine. But okay, most people look at this and go, oh, that's great. You know, I get 100 registrants. Well, firstly, what does 100 registrants cost you in time or money or energy? Most people are not actually getting anywhere near 100 registrants, by the way. And so also look at, well, that's 100 people. So that's 100 leads, but it's not just leads, it's 100 people. So if we start looking at this through the perspective of people and relationships, what we're actually looking at is only 3 people actually engaged Now, obviously, there's exceptions. Some people send messages and, blah, blah, blah. But statistically, this is kind of what happens. You get one, two, three, four, five, maybe somewhere in that range, possibly zero, of people that engage in some kind of conversation. And so even if you take a relationship driven as opposed to generation approach, from that point onwards, you've got 97 people that did not engage. And so you didn't get the opportunity to form a potential relationship with 97 people. And so what's typically happens is the 99 who don't buy then get ignored or hard pitched. For example, if you go to Colt Gordon, who's actually really great at the hard pitch sales driven stuff. So if you want that, just go and work with him and you'll be bestest buddies and love your life. One of the first things he will do is put an appointment setter into this type of funnel to call every single person for the purpose of selling them shit. It's literally the purpose of doing it, to set appointments to sell them shit, which is kind of the opposite of building a relationship. So that's not the only thing you'll do. You'll also end up with like Frank Kern style. If you're ever on Frank Kern's email list, I unsubscribed a few years ago, even though I like the guy in small doses. I remember when I first joined his email list, I got sent down some kind of funnel promotion for like a year nonstop, like offer, 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 offer. It's just like relentless. And that's a lot of what people are doing as well from a tactical marketing perspective. Is they're like, okay, you're generating these leads. Okay, how do we nurture these leads? They don't really mean how do we nurture these leads. They mean how do we pitch these leads to get them into that three so that we've got an opportunity to sell them. That's what most systems are doing, whether intentionally or otherwise. So what you're trying to do is sell everybody in this type of approach. And if you use relationship generation on the same kind of numbers, you take the same 100 leads, you engage about 30% before the event. What does engage mean? Why 30%? So engage means to simply connect, have some kind of conversation. Now, I was actually away before this event, so I didn't do that for this event, but I do this for other events, and I'll be doing this afterwards. So before is an optimization, but afterwards is totally fine as well. And why 30%? So when I'm doing this, I literally look at every single registrant. I load up their LinkedIn profile. Those of you who have LinkedIn Premium or Sales Navigator may have noticed that I looked at some of your profiles. And I go, okay, is this person in market or not, or adjacent to my market as a potential referrer or something like that? And if they're not, or I just don't engage. It's like, okay, that sounds a little bit harsh, but it's like, well, I've only got limited time. There's like 75 people who registered for this event. And we didn't even promote it on two of the channels that we normally use, again, because I was away and stuff didn't happen. So it's like, I don't have time. I legitimately don't have time. And it's not going to be efficient for me to engage with someone who's like employed at Dell in some middle manager position, for example, because that's not my target market. So it's like, I'm happy for them to show up. I'm happy for them to come to me and raise my hand and say, hey, actually, I've got this coaching program on the side, or I got this thing. Oh, okay, no problem. But from the outside, it doesn't make sense for me to like look at something like that when I work with coaches, consultants, and service providers, and I find some middle manager or, someone in the army, or like all sorts of things happen. You don't know why. There's a bunch of competitors that have registered for this event. It's like, okay, fine. Competitors can be great, by the way. Especially if they do something different. Anyway, that's a whole different sidebar. But so, yeah, typically I'm finding engage about 30%, ideally before the event. After is also fine. You get a higher shot rate because of the engagement, means people like know who you are, remember who you are, and all of that sort of stuff. And particularly engagement with the recording, because a lot of those people that you end up in conversation with, that conversation goes something along the lines of, hey, I'd love to make it, but I can't insert reason here. Well, now you've actually got some kind of connection. And when you send them the recording, it's ideal to do this personally in the messages. Like I'm going to send out a bulk email to everybody as well, but I can tell you it's almost not worth doing. The only reason I do it is every time I don't, and I've toyed with not doing it, I get some variation of complaints. And the other reason is the people who do show up also want the recording. So I definitely want to give it to them. And then if I'm going to go to this effort to like segment out the people who attended versus didn't attend, which you can get, but then you got to load them and tag them in your CRM or integrate it. It's like, can't be bothered. It's just easier to send it to everybody. That's really the only reason that I do it. But most people will not watch the recording. So I vastly prefer and optimize the whole system for live. It's just very different live. Everybody gets busy. But when you send someone in a personal conversation after having some kind of meaningful engagement, and you say, "Hey, actually, we had this thing. I know you missed it. It'd be really good." Blah 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 blah. It doesn't even need to be a recording of the thing they registered for. It could be a recording of something else. It could be a VSL. It could be a personal video that you sent them. It could be something from your course or training library. Like they're very likely to watch it at that point as well. And then the approach is you don't focus on calls or close rate or cash or cost per register and dollars per register or all these kind of things, because these are, thanks Joe for the comment, they are inherently transactional metrics. And so that's not to say that you don't track them. This is a whole nuanced conversation I don't have time for today. You don't want to focus on them because they're actually a byproduct of taking a consistent relationship generation approach. One of the biggest concepts I'm a fan of is leading versus lagging indicators. Leading indicators are generally the activities that result in the lagging indicators. Sales, for example, or cash collected or net profit or whatever is a lagging indicator. So if you focus on a lagging indicator, this is the fastest way to fail to achieve your goals. What you want to do is focus on the leading indicators that when you achieve them, make the lagging indicators a fait accompli. And so here, my argument is most people are focusing on things like these kind of metrics. But if you do a good job of relationship generation and being preeminent and actually helping people, these things will happen as a natural byproduct. And there will be a lot less pressure on you in terms of optimizing those things, because those things, unless you are an expert manipulator, can be really, really hard to optimize and really, really hard to know. Like if you're, anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on that. So you also focus on who's a good potential fit as a potential relationship. That's one, like I should have a diagram here. And then you want their engagement with something. So for example, inviting someone to an event, well, what happens? There's people who, note to self, I need a diagram. What kind of good consultant doesn't just overload everybody with diagrams? It's my favorite kind of meme on Instagram is the McKinsey consultants dragging boxes all over the place, and yay! Look at how valuable I am. Anyway, so you want to take people who are a potential good fit and intersect that with their engagement. Those are the people you want to engage in conversation. So the good thing about something like an event like this is people had to actively do something to register for this event. You had to click on a notification and at least click on the pre-filled form. If not, change some of the data in it, or you had to look at a message, click on it, click register, click the form. Like you had to do something. There's some kind of commitment. There's some kind of intent motion towards like the thing that we're talking about. So that's not the only people that we connect with, though. You've got the first degree connections, the people you connect with, the people you have messages with that don't register. And so this is a concentric circles type thing. So inside something like this, you've got the people who during or after some kind of presentation, some kind of event, they raise their hand and they say, either I want to work with you, or I want to discuss, or I want to collaborate, something like that. Like those are the most obvious people, but they're also statistically the smallest. And you're not necessarily going to get more of those people. In fact, you often get less of those people per event on an individual micro basis than if you take the lead generation, hard pitch driven approach. So those webinar numbers that I talked about previously, here, like you on an individual event, you may get less sales statistically. This is part of the reason people don't do it. But what they're missing is when you have multiple events, when events are just part of your ecosystem, when you take a relationship driven approach, you generate far more business outside of the marketing than in it. And so that's what I'm aiming to do here. Like it's one of the reasons, sorry, my headphones have just decided to do something funny. It's one of the reasons why I'm not including, details on an offer and a pitch and all that sort of stuff, because my focus is not conversions, it's collaboration. Anyway, so those are the people that we want to talk about, to connect with. And instead of engaging with, say, 3 people in the sales process, likely what happens is the 2 that don't buy end up mostly ghosting you. Like it's not quite 2, but like it'll be most. And then you end up with maybe 20 or 30 people in conversations. You end up with 5 or 10 calls. This doesn't all happen at once. So it's not like you put together a single event and then it's like, oh, great, I got 10 calls instead of 3, tends not to work that way. But it's cumulative goodwill. And it's cumulative relationship building. So over time, and usually measured by a couple of months in this kind of process, the activities, and this is again the leading versus lagging indicators, the activities you performed around that first event, this is what it results in. And so if you've done it authentically, you'll magically is not quite right. You will, as a byproduct of the activity that you put out and the energy that you put out, you will generate some combination of these things. And so this is when I talk about collaboration, I mean any of these 5 categories, all of these 5 categories. Often people are in multiples. So clients, obvious. They're a perfect fit for your offer. They're in market and they're ready to buy. The reason I define them that way is like they're not going to actually be clients at that point unless they're in that. And so they bring revenue, case studies, testimonials, long-term business potential. So your strategy here is to build trust, demonstrate value, and make a natural transition offer to working together. The second category is referrers or connectors or super connectors. So these are people who may not buy from you. Again, people can be in multiple categories, but they know people who would, either as individual sort of touch point referrals. So for example, I had a call with someone as a result of doing this kind of outreach, and I did not take a transactional pitch oriented approach to the call. I took a relationship oriented approach to the call. And I even said to this person beforehand, I don't know, like you're in a different market. Like I'm very happy to connect. I just want to make sure we're not wasting each other's time. So we both turned up with no agenda, just started talking about stuff. And then I had a client from him paid in cash the next day. It's like, there's an example of what happens. There's no chance that happened if I took, and this happens all the time. I've got hundreds of examples of this. There's no chance that happened if I took if I took a transactional approach to that call. It's like, no, you're not in the target market, piss off. Like, or you're not through my funnel, not going to do it. Whereas we're just going, yeah, you're a human. Let's connect. Let's see how I can add value. That's my approach. Like if we have a call, it'd be, how can I add value to you? That's it. That's my approach. I don't need to talk about it anymore. We can talk tactically if you're not sure what that means, but most of the people I work with, they know what that means. They're doing that already. They're just not doing it in their marketing, and they're not setting up their system to generate relationships. They're doing it to generate leads and opportunities and follow that sales and marketing driven approach while actually kind of hating sales and marketing. So it's like, we just got to line these things up. So they obviously warm introductions to ideal clients, warm inbound leads. This is another thing. So if you're doing some kind of event, I can tell you from the data that I've had over the years that if you've got a referral partner generating traffic, well, you've got different audiences, right? You've got your own audience, you've got someone else's audience, and then you've got cold audience. Funnily enough, the cold audience converts the worst. And that's one of the reasons with what we do, why we do multiple events and why we don't hard pitch, because many of you, just looking at the attendee list, yeah, I think we're running at about 50% people that I recognize and 50% people that I don't. So that's about right for this type of thing. But the people that are cold, like if I just hard pitch you, it'll be either you're interested and you buy or you piss off. Like that's just like what happens energetically because of that energy of sort of pitching. Some of you might stick around and then sort of get ground down like flour or something until you finally, succumb to another pitch. I don't like this approach, as you can tell, but that's kind of what happens. Whereas what I do is I turn cold people into warm people by not doing that, and so the time frame relative to the hard pitch of those small number of clients can actually extend. But this is why you need to take a long-term approach. The total value that you collect is multiples. Over time. And I've proven that out time and time again. You've also got advocates or brand supporters. So they'll help you with word of mouth exposure, credibility, audience expansion. They'll engage with your content, that kind of thing. But they don't necessarily refer or buy. Collaborators. So I'd refer to this whole category as collaboration, but then you also have the people that are actual collaborators. So typically this is someone who serves the same audience, but in a non-competing way. And it can be referrals. It can also be co-marketing opportunities, integrated marketing opportunities. My favorite, I'll come back to that, which joint ventures, bundled offers, things like that. And so it's a way to explore goals and create win-win collaborations. Then you got future clients, which is just category 1, but not yet. So speaking of just a little sidebar on integrated marketing, when my first child was born, almost 10 years ago. We left the maternity hospital with a little goodie bag. And inside the goodie bag were a bunch of products and vouchers and things, one of which was for a baby photographer. And you might have had a similar experience. And there's obviously things like you attend a conference and you get the same kind of thing with the pens and the books and all this sort of stuff. But something like that, where it's an offer and it's a tracked offer as well, in that it had some kind of special deal and a code, things like that these days, QR code, whatever. That's integrated marketing, because for that baby photographer, every single time a baby was born at this maternity hospital, they got a lead. So it's integrated into the client service delivery of the hospital, and it is marketing for the external person. If you can do deals like that, we're doing a bunch of them. I'm a director in a couple of financial services businesses that are unrelated to the consulting business. And this is our principal strategy, actually. It can be a bit of effort to pull off, but once you get it right, you just get an endless tap of leads. And the ideal way to do it is integrated into client service delivery on the other side, rather than integrated into marketing on the other side, because then you're dealing with their clients that they have the highest trust with, and all of that sort of stuff. You're essentially cherry picking the very best, the most trusted people, and you're not having to constantly promote. So, for example, with referrers, you have to constantly promote. Like, it's like herding cats to get them to do things. So let's say they're going to send traffic for an event. Well, how many times are they going to do that? Are they going to do it once? Are they going to do it every time? They probably can't do it every time. Like, there's all these kind of things. So anyway, that's a little sidebar that I love it. I won't spend too much time on this. I'll just say, obviously, what are the alternatives? We've talked about old school business development versus full on internet marketer. That's not the lens that I want to look at these alternatives through this time. So the identity definition that I define is a relationship generator. That's what we're doing in the middle. That's why it's in light green, because I hate the glaring green and I'm not that good at graphic design. So sorry. So this is multiple traffic sources, effortless content production. You'll see that in a minute. One simple funnel, which is really just an event and an invitation. And it's a relationship-driven process. So in order to pull this off, and this is the part that I want to focus on, like, what do you need to be good at in order to pull off this versus the other things? Minimal marketing skill. It's relatively easy to outsource and delegate 80% of it to either team or someone like us. You need relationship inclination and skill. And you also have far more economic room to maneuver, because you're not paying business development managers and you're not paying ad spend. On one end, you've got Hermit. Hermit's probably not a great thing, but you're surviving usually on referrals, usually with no real funnel or process, and success is somewhat random. I've done this too. Again, I've done all of these things. And this type of person is often lured by the idea of low ticket products and memberships where you don't have to talk to people. But what you don't realize is how much marketing skill is involved in pulling these off. And the risk in terms of traffic costs and retention. So big, dirty secret people don't talk about with these kind of models is retention. So you go, oh, great, it's like $97 a month. You don't have to do anything. Yeah, and the average is people last 2.3 months. So you may as well have just sold them a $240 course, because you'll make just as much money. And you won't have to bother with community and all these kind of things. So there is a place for that, but it's again, the bar of professionalism is really high. At the other end, you've got the professional marketer and salesperson. So multiple traffic sources, heaps of content production. These are the sort of people you see that are prolific over social media. Complicated funnels, myriad conversion events, meaning they're doing lots of different things. So in my second 7-figure business, we did this all day. We ran live events, we ran challenges, we ran conversions, we ran giveaways, blah, 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 like endless stream of marketing, and endless stream of different events that we would, and it was very sales driven. So to do this, you need a high level of marketing skill, which we had. You need a supporting team, which we had. You need sales skill, inclination, and team, which we had. You need tight control over economics and risk, which we did not have. And it's risky to outsource and delegate this stuff, which we found out the hard way. So you can do it, but there's also that energy and alignment and identity question of, is this who you want to be? And if you're here at this point, you probably don't. So that's that one. Here is an example of a client that I took through this process previously using outbound appointment setting. So they were doing about 30 calls a week. And he's like, oh my God, 30 calls a week. That would be awesome. hold on. And I've dealt with this a lot. I've engaged lots of people doing, several people doing this over the years. I've also worked with people as clients who have done this as well. And you fall into a spectrum where most of the time it doesn't work, but a lot of the time it does work, but it only works on the front end, which is also the same problem with something because you're focusing on traffic rather than the actual end-to-end system. So 30 calls, 20 show up, 15 like vaguely know what the call is about, 10 are qualified but skeptical. So already 2/3 of the effort that we're doing time-wise is completely wasted. But the skeptical part is dangerous. And you don't necessarily see this afterwards because you go into this. A lot of people that I know that are doing this kind of thing for the first time, they've got greater than 50% close rates because it's warm and referral traffic and from their own audience and it's low volume. So they think that that's going to transfer, or they think, oh, maybe I've dropped to 30% or 20%, because I've heard those kind of numbers that 30% is doing really well, 20% is like KPI. It's like, yeah, but most of the time, the close rate is actually closer to 0 rather than 20. And the less manipulation driven sales skills you have, the closer that will be to 0. And it's just due to the nature of the hard pitch and the cold and the qualified and the energy and all this kind of stuff. Like I can go into it, but this is just the experience I've seen personally and with other people that I know that have done this. And most people ghost or end up in a never-ending follow-up game that also saps the living energy out of you. So it's 90 to 99% waste. It's completely energetically draining, and this is a real example of these numbers. It's not viable economics to delegate either. Because you're like, oh, okay, this is great, I'm generating all these sales calls. Well, how are you going to get a salesperson to take this over? Because that doesn't change the fundamental waste in this process. And so the way this person was doing it was also single channel risk, SMS only. And you go, okay, well, that's easy, add another channel. Well, it's not always easy to add another channel that's a direct pitch channel. Like you used to be able to do it on Facebook. It's really hard to do it there. People are still doing it in Instagram, but only really on consumer oriented offers. LinkedIn can't do it anymore. Used to be able to do it 10 years ago. So that's SMS, you can actually do it. I don't know, other channels, maybe you can do it on TikTok, don't really know. But yeah, so then the approach with the relationship generation is we ran 2 events a month with SMS and LinkedIn as channels. And we're averaging 7 calls, 5 of which were prospects, 2 of which were partners. And so that on average resulted in 2 clients and 1 partner referral. So that didn't necessarily mean a new referral partner signed up, but it's like on average, an additional client came from a referral as a result of this. So it was 3 times the results for 20% of the effort. The approach is highly efficient, brings energy. It's a viable basis for scale. So at this point, you can add traffic sources. This particular client chose to take things over and do things themselves at this point, which is great. So I don't really know what they're doing at this point, but yeah. And part of the reason was they were also a professional marketer, just in a different area. So they had the skill set to be able to do that. More profiles, more messages, affiliate partners, cold email, paid traffic. There's some of the things that we do over time. And it complements other activity, which is, sorry, I didn't put that slide up. Anyway, you'll get that. I'll send the slide along with the recording. So that's the theory. That's what relationship generation is. If anyone has any questions about that, like Nick, put that in the Q&A. He was a good little champ and did that. So I'm just going to take a pause to read that before I go into the kind of tactics of this. So all our business is from inbound leads right now. This helps in some way because I have a lot of hot takes that repel some people. Yeah, and I know Nick very well, so I'll try and generalize this. Some people, it attracts people we do want to work with. The problem I'm envisaging is that cold outreach might throw away the advantage of our current market self-selecting very effectively. When I expect that the percentage of the market ready for our weirdness, I love that, is like less than 0.5%. Any thoughts on that? Fantastic question. So I actually deleted a slide. Let me see. Let me see if I have it in this other version. It's all right. Anyway, that'll take me too long. I'll just talk about it. But I deleted a slide on content marketing because it's like, it's not really directly relevant to what we're doing here. And for you, Nick, I'll send it to you afterwards. But the problem with content marketing is most people are using content marketing for lead generation and it doesn't work. Now, I know you have a blog with enough traffic where it might work, just theoretically. Sorry, I'll get to that in a minute, Igor. So content, so it's kind of a bifurcation. So if you're here and you are creating content and that content is resulting in clients consistently and it's a high leverage activity, I kind of don't know why you're here, because you've got something that's working. Content is amazing. Like it's the best way of doing things, if you can do it. And if you can do it for lead generation and opportunity generation. And the unfortunate thing is 99.9% of people that I've seen can't. Even when they're learning from the people that, say they know how to do it, it's like you've got to be so good. You've got to be really energetically into creating conversion-oriented content, which is different than, say, blog content. You've got to really like self-promoting. You generally need to build some kind of personal brand around yourself, yada, yada, yada. So it's great. And so I'm generalizing it first before making it specific to you. It's great, but most people can't and don't pull it off. So it is actually in our system. You'll see in a minute. But the difference is I'm not using content to generate leads. I'm using content to nurture the leads that have already been generated from outbound. So to specifically answer your question, yes, cold outreach, especially for an offer. So you have cold outreach tends to be one of two categories. You have an offer-driven cold outreach, which is a hard pitch. And that's okay. Like it actually works. I've done that a bunch. I've made it work a bunch. The problem is, and this problem is highly specific to your situation, if you've got a smaller target market, then the number of people that you're cold pitching, obviously most of them are going to ignore you, like most, like a very large percentage are going to ignore you, typically above 99%. And so if your target market is smaller, you're churning and burning through prospects. So that's where the friendly ask comes in, where we use it. I sort of like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing if it's cooked, which I used to do growing up as a kid. So we want to focus on the spaghetti that sticks and everything else that falls down. It's like, it's not ready yet. So this is where there's actually a meta purpose to an event like this, which is I don't really care who registers to a certain extent, who shows up, even anything in this type of scenario, because the mere fact that someone saw an event invitation and registered for it tells me a lot, like at a meta level. Firstly, it tells me that they're responsive on the platform in which I invited them. So in this example, LinkedIn, because that was the only traffic source for this event. It also tells me that they're interested in the topic, like obviously. But okay, if they're responsive and they're interested in a topic that is related to what I do, because I mean, why else would you put on some kind of event? I mean, I suppose I could put an event on monetary theory if we really want to talk about that, but it doesn't relate to what I do. I'm certainly not going to be selling anyone economics advisory services, although anyway, sidebar, do a better job than most of the people that do. But anyway, so yeah, like that's a signal. So in your case, like you could use something like what we're talking about here to like just simply sift people out and then switch to the relationship driven personal manual approach. You can also do the personal manual driven approach from the very beginning. And if your target market is really small, that you actually have to, is my argument. So one of the things we look at when working with a potential client is how big is your target market, because we are still doing marketing in the beginning and then we're filtering people based on that responsiveness and interest. But if the initial pool of target market is not large enough, that filtering gets rid of too many people. So you just need to do everything manually. So I've had clients in the past, prospects in the past that I've had to turn away. Like I can help them on other things like their offer or their sales process and delivery and things like that. But I have chosen not to help them in terms of, any kind of agency services because their target market's too small. It's like the approach to do that is you either need to do the business development, blah, 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 blah. You need to do content. You need to do referral partners. Pretty much you need to do the shit yourself. And so in that kind of example, for example, instead of inviting someone to an event, you'd spend the time researching their profile, their business, look up whatever, they appeared in BRW and then you'd craft a very, like you could still go cold, but it would be highly personalized and highly relevant to their particular situation. So you're going to get a very statistically high response rate. You can still do that, but are they going to be ready? So what you want to look for when you do something like this, Noah, if you could put your question in the chat, the Q&A, that would be fantastic as well. I've got to move on pretty soon. And I'm happy to stick around after as well for more questions. But if you, sorry, where were we? Yeah. So if you want to deal with this where it's a small target market, you it's really inefficient to do this kind of thing because you can now you're not going to destroy the audience like from a relationship perspective, but even you can't like you just can't deal with the loss of efficiency. So that said, if you going back to my first point, if you don't already have this content producing a sufficient quantity of leads and opportunities, you got to do something, right? So what is that something? Well, one of the approach that we take, as we'll see tactically in a minute, if you have existing audience, it's to promote the same thing to that existing audience. So I'll save that one for when we get there. But what it's like what we're looking for is the friendly ask. We're looking for that responsiveness. We're looking for that interest, so that then you can spend your manual outbound, if you want to think of it that way, uh, business development efforts on people that are actually likely to be interested. So in your example, okay, there's going to be, I remember what I was going to say previously, there's going to be that market, like, yeah, you've got your target market, but then you've got essentially an enterprise sale. So inside an enterprise sale, timing is everything. I mean, that's kind of definitionally true anyway. So what we are looking for from either your outreach message, so if you're going to do an outreach message to someone, you would want to find some kind of signal. A previous mentor of mine calls this a moment of heightened receptivity, which is a signal that that person is in the right stage of the buying cycle. So, for example, with us previously, we were looking to help accountants with offshoring and some other things. So the signal that we looked for was them hiring. So, like, this obviously requires a bit more research than just, oh, yeah, I'm going to pull up a sales navigator list and send everybody messages, right? Uh, we had to look to see if they had a hiring post on their website on Indeed, well, here Seek, but Indeed or whatever platform, or on LinkedIn itself, and those were the only people that we outreach to because we knew they were growing and we knew they had pain. So if you're going to do something like that, I would be like, okay, what's a signal? And it needs to be a public signal, like one you can figure out from actions that they are taking somewhere or something on their website or something in their socials that gives you a much higher probability of this person being at the right stage of the buying cycle, like not too late, not too early. So that's the first point. The second, if you're using this kind of content approach, and this is true for content marketing in general, you're going to have different content that relates to different sort of stages of buyer awareness. So if you are looking for solution aware people, you're going to start talking about the actual, products and way of implementing it and that kind of thing. And so that type of content would be, and so the same with these type of events. So if you run an event, and I know your stuff is related to software development and data analytics, for example, I don't really know enough about the details of that in terms of what events, but I'd be imagining something like, if you ran an event where it's like, I'm going to compare Snowflake with this, like I don't know the tools, even though I used to be in tech, whatever. Okay, that type of event is pretty highly likely to generate people that are like solution oriented, right? And solution aware. You go back one step, if you're looking for problem aware people, you're going to be talking about the problems of not having data analytics or the problems of going about data analytics a different way or something like that. So you've got to match your offer to the buying cycle. So in your case, if I can't remember, but if you are looking for people that don't have data analytics, then you want but need it, then you need to be sort of targeting your content around that segment. So another is the level of the problem. So in that earlier example I gave where you're starting to compare tools, you're not going to get the right target market if your decision maker is like an executive, but the people that are interested in the tool comparison are like the grunt workers. So there's a couple of different dimensions that we need to look at on that. Hopefully that's enough of an answer for now. Happy to obviously talk privately about this later. Igor, engaging 30% of the pool could be energetically draining too, especially at large scale. Yes, great point. So you're referring to engaging 30% of the people that register for an event. Yeah, I should have said the reason I look at this as concentric circles, and I think I just ADHD didn't quite finish that point, is you've got the people that raise their hand in the middle, you've got the people that attend you, as the next layer. Then you got the people that register, and then you got the people that connect. Now there's other forms in terms of content, like you got the people that like but haven't connected. So it's like these concentric circles. What you want to do is tailor how much time and energy you spend from the inside out. So most people actually end up spending most of their time trying to get the people from the outside towards the inside. But the beauty of something like this is we actually start the other way around, which is way more efficient. So obviously the people that raise their hand for some kind of conversation, like, yeah, most people are going to want to talk to that until the point though, and all of these are a personal threshold thing, until the point you have too many calls. So I've had too many calls in the past. And then what do you do? Well, you don't focus on trying to get more calls. You focus on filtering the calls that you do already have. It's just most of the time, most like vast majority of the time, people don't have too many calls unless they do something like that appointment setting example where I talked about, where they do have too many calls and you need to start filtering. But in terms of leveraging this sort of inbound, outbound hybrid approach, yeah, you'd start with those people, but then you got time. Like either you've got enough work and you've got enough leads and enough prospects, or you don't. And so you keep going from the inside out until that condition is true. So yes, you're absolutely right. Over time and large scale, you're probably not going to be engaging 30%. You might engage 3%. You might engage 3 people per event. This is entirely up to you, and it depends on your time and energy and economics. And this is part of what we do with clients is tailor that. And yeah, sometimes you might have someone on the team doing it because there's that additional layer. It's like I generally talk about stuff we do, stuff the client does, but within the stuff that the client does, there can also be stuff that you do as the founder or owner, and stuff that people on your team do. So yeah, it's entirely tailored, but generally, the people that I'm working with are wanting to generate a fair degree of business. So in the beginning, you'll do more of it, and over time, you'll do less of it. This is something that I really like from an energy perspective as well, because when I sign up to something, I want it to get directionally better. I want it to make me more money, save me more time, and cost me less energy and bring me more energy, conversely, over time. So I don't particularly care personally. This is my approach. I don't care where something starts anywhere near as much as what direction it's heading in, because I know that I win with the benefit of time if I take that kind of approach. So hopefully that made sense. Thanks for the question. That was a good one. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll connect with you after, Noah. Thanks very much. Okay. Everyone's going to have to stop with the compliments, or I'm going to start like blushing or something. So anyway, thanks, guys. So I'm going to talk tactics now. If you need to go, that's totally cool. I understand there will be the recording. I will send this through. If you just simply want us to do the tactics for you instead, just holler and we'll have some kind of conversation. But so at a tactical level, so I need to separate out the strategy and the tactics. So far, the strategy that I've talked about works independently of platform. I'm just going to show you how we do it in terms of platforms. So when I say this is a great system for you, Eve, I'm talking about the tactical level. And I'm also talking about really, because this is what we do and the way we do it. Like, as I said, we don't do Facebook ads. We don't do TikTok. We do use LinkedIn, email, social, SMS. So there's some people that's a good fit for, and some people that it's not. So I won't be offended if you jump off because this is not a good fit and you take everything that I've talked about and go, yeah, I'm just going to apply that to whatever we're doing. So tactical, everything from here on is tactics. You are established and already know who you serve, how to fulfill on your promises, and how to have authentic enrollment conversations. That's going to be most people. You have an existing LinkedIn account with at least 1,000 connections. Prior to about November 27 last year, you didn't really need the existing connections. Now, existing connections are more important. There also were easier ways of buying additional profiles. We are still experimenting with that, but it's a little bit harder. Short version is LinkedIn's a little bit harder than it used to be, and that's part of the catalyst for sort of improving this system so that it works in like that. So just I got to backtrack for the story there. We ran an event 2 days before that, whatever it was, and it was great. Everything worked. The funnel was perfect, like every step, blah blah blah. So now this was a more funnel oriented approach, right? Because I just called it a funnel rather than relationship driven. We'd always actually talked about the relationship driven element, but we never really did it. Back to Igor's question. Well, I did do it, but I did it selectively and ad hoc rather than being my focus. even though my previous data said that on average, like that's how I got most of my business. It wasn't from the direct conversions, it was from the indirect conversions of having the conversation, showing up, having people make comments like was in the chat. So even though that was how I was generating my business, my focus was too transactional on the, internet marketing funnel type of stuff. So we ran this funnel, it all worked perfectly. I'm like, brilliant. Like this is perfect for scale. And then LinkedIn changed their algorithm. And basically, what they did is they cut the volume by about 80% in terms of what we were able to outreach on any given profile. So we were using 4 profiles at the time. And so that reduced our impact down to below that of a single profile. And after panicking for a day or two, because this has been working for years, what we were doing. It's just I finally I dialed it in with a new business. Sorry, I've dialed it in plenty of other times before, but this is like a new business where it's like, great, like got it. Like this one's ready to go. Roll it out kind of thing. A new business of mine rather than the clients. And then everything changed. And so this is why we've been in the bunker for the last couple of months, sort of making sure that what we're doing is not only going to work in that context, but sort of frankly will work regardless of the context. So that's why we've jumped back to principles and everything. So you're going to want that. Your target market is on LinkedIn. You can do this with SMS as well. You can do it with cold email. Full disclaimer, I'm still testing cold email. I tried a direct pitch cold email approach, did not work well at all. So I'm in the process of doing event invites, which I know will work. I just haven't proven it yet, but we have proven it with LinkedIn and with SMS. We've done SMS both ways, event invites and that. And realistically, cold email is not that different than SMS. SMS is just more responsive. So yeah, you could potentially get away with it if your target market is not on LinkedIn, but we'd want to have a conversation. You need to be comfortable presenting to a group of people. Like I've got my quirks, you can have your quirks. That's totally fine. This is not the only way of doing events either. Most of my clients actually do Zoom meetings rather than Zoom webinars. And different formats as well. We'll talk about those as well. Your client lifetime value should be $10,000 or greater. We are talking many of you will have $100,000 plus client lifetime values as well, which obviously just makes things even better and makes relationships even more important. But if you are under that, firstly, I can probably fix that for you. But secondly, I can almost certainly fix that for you because that's the other part of what I do on the consulting side. But you're going to have an economic problem, because this approach is much lower volume of traffic than, say, an ad-driven approach, but it's much higher quality, as we'll see in a minute. So, but when your offer price, when your client lifetime value is too low, the quality doesn't make up for the lack of volume and the lack of scalability in that volume. So you're willing to treat every person who enters your world as a human and a potential relationship rather than just a number on a spreadsheet, which sort of relates to the previous point as well. So if you're going to be doing the marketing funnel, lead generation stuff, you're treating people as numbers. And that's okay if you're selling a course, an info product, something like that. Yeah, frankly, they're numbers. And as you grow, you would rather have fewer but more meaningful and fruitful sales conversations, i.e. the complete opposite of what almost everybody else is pitching. So that's for you if it's good for you. This is the system. So I'm going to talk through this at hopefully you can see my pointer, but if not, hopefully I'll describe it. So this is what we do with clients. One-time preparation is figuring out on here on the left, target market approach. So that's obviously, ideally, you know who your target market is, but that doesn't mean we know where to find them. So it's like, what lists, when we're using SMS, what lists are we going to get? How are we going to get these people? Are we going to validate these people? Who are we contacting? What's the decision maker? What are their titles? And I'll show you tactically what this looks like in LinkedIn as well. What do these people look like? So I'll come back to that one. We then want to warm up your profiles. If you've been actively promoting and posting and messaging people on LinkedIn, you don't really need to do this. But one of the things that I really like doing with clients is having more than one profile. So how do you get more than one profile? Well, team members, business partners, family, or you buy them. Obviously, there's a little asterisk on the buying them. But when we do it for clients, we'll promote on up to 5 profiles simultaneously. The best way of doing it, so the authority profile is the best, which is yours or a business partner or like a senior person in the business. Let's say you're doing a consulting business and you've got an employed senior consultant. Well, that's an authority profile. It may not be quite as good as the owner or whatever, but it's like, that's fine. The ones that you make up that are purchase profiles, or people that are like family members and unrelated, that's fine. We can position them in a way that's, in integrity and that kind of thing. But you're not going to be pretending that they're something that they're not. They're essentially just lead generation profiles. So they work, but they don't work as well. So an authority profile, and the more connections you've got, the more posting, the more, all of that, the better. But this is all a spectrum. It all works. But in terms of outreach, we need to make sure that it's like cold email. You got to warm up domains and email boxes and that kind of stuff. You don't want to just go from zero to hero immediately. You need to stage it. Is the short version. We do something called, I'll show you all of this as well, develop your messaging matrix. This is essentially the language that you're going to use, and this is constantly refined. It's a living, breathing document. But we need to start somewhere. So definitions, for example, I talk about triple profitability and relationship generation. So what are these terms? In my consulting work, I work with people to help them identify, articulate and communicate their unique intellectual property using a bunch of proprietary methods and frameworks and things like that. So that's an example of what would go into the messaging matrix. Some people have that already. They've developed their own IP. If you don't, I'd like to create it because then we can use it in the messaging. So, for example, the messaging around this event included relationship generation system. What's that? Well, you're going to find out in the event. Then we develop your event strategy. So, for example, what I typically do is I base the event strategy on the intellectual property. So this is an example. The relationship generation system is the intellectual property. I've got lots of different IP frameworks and methods, about half a dozen core ones, but this is one. And so this particular event is the whole thing. But then I'll run a series of events that break it down. And so I'll talk about one piece of it. So this is particularly good if there is a method. So to me, a method has direction. So I have a framework called the expert scaling system that has 5 components. So in that example, and it's a method, you do this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, then this one. So to me, there's 6 event topics. The first one is the whole system, and then the 5 individual systems. And then that's enough. I'll just circle back and start repeating them. And you can change the topics and titles and things like that without necessarily changing the content. One of the great ways about doing it this way is you're kind of only building one slide deck. And then you're just choosing which slides from it to present. Some of them will be, all of it, but without the detail, which is kind of more this, like we're doing some detail. But I'll do another one here that's a deep dive on these tactics. So it's like, okay, this is how to do this particular thing on LinkedIn. Whereas here, I'm just going to gloss over it, frankly. And people are going to be interested in different things. And this is part of the way you can go back to the same audience and offer them something new. And then, so let's say we were doing those 6 events every 2 weeks. That's obviously going to take 3 months. Well, firstly, we can probably just cycle that exactly as is. People are going to forget what you promoted 3 months ago. But we can also, and we will learn this, and this is part of the data-driven feedback loop, what are people most responsive to? We might test a new headline, test a new hook, test some new messaging. So the event strategy is usually that. But if you don't have an IP-driven approach, we need to do something else. And so back to Nick's question, for example, part of the event strategy would be, okay, who are these people? What are they interested in? Where are they in the stages of buyer awareness? Are they problem aware? Are they solution aware? Are they unaware? Where do we want to target them? What level do we want to target them at? And what type of topics are going to engage people? And so this is one of the beauties of focusing on relationship generation. We actually only need the topic as a signal. So in Nick's case, for example, I know he needs more sales opportunities. I wouldn't really care that much who turns up. I mean, obviously that's better, who raises their hand, even if nobody raises their hand. The mere act, what you're trying to find is like that diamond in the rough, so to speak. Like you said, 0.5% or whatever the number is, like some small number of people that will like the weirdness. So I'd be really looking at, okay, what's going to give me the best signal that this is the right type of person, and then just almost completely ignore the event. Like the event is it's just an excuse to try and find and fish out the right people in terms of definition and intent and responsiveness, and then just take over completely manually. That's frankly one of the best ways of doing this. It's just, and maybe I probably should have said this differently as well, because you're doing both. The way we're doing it, we are doing a funnel. Like there are registrants, there are people who show up, there are people who raise their hand. That's the direct path. It's just the indirect path is like 3 to 10 times more in terms of benefit over time. So, but you do both. But you don't. But given this is the smaller component of the benefit, you don't actually have to do it at all, other than as that kind of excuse or catalyst. Okay, so that's kind of the setup. We recommend setting up the first 2 events. I recommend running them every 2 weeks. If you have additional traffic sources, you might run them more frequently. If you don't have enough time, you might run them less frequently. But historically, even in the marketing oriented kind of business, we found that on average, people were attending 2.5 events before making a purchasing decision. So if you run them more frequently, you just have more of an opportunity to do, more topics, more engagement, more momentum, and you're going to fasten the sales cycle. But you don't have to. So this works kind of whichever way you do it. But if you are doing them every 2 weeks, we do recommend promoting over 2 weeks. 1 week tends not to be enough on LinkedIn. Again, if you've got additional traffic sources like an email list or a social audience, you might be fine. But if you are doing it it's going to be a little bit tight in terms of transitioning from promoting the first event to promoting the next event. So if you're always 1 event ahead, you or your team will be able to just immediately switch, as opposed to, say, you spend 2 weeks of promotion, you run the event, and then it takes you another week to get the next event running. That might be fine. You might want to do that, but then you have to run them every 3 weeks, which can also be a little harder to schedule. So there's that. So that little thing there will enable you to do 50% more volume, basically. So in terms of event promotion, obviously this repeats per event, but just using event 1 as an example, we do all of this, and I'll show you tactically this stuff in a minute. Of LinkedIn event invitations, which is native. They're the ones if you saw in the notifications, it sends you that. SMS invitations, didn't do that for this particular event. Social posting invitations, again, didn't do these 3 because I was away. And then affiliates and referral partner invitations as well. So there's multiple ways we do the LinkedIn event notifications. LinkedIn event invitations, and you'll have seen them. Some are Sales Navigator, some are that, and some are messages. I'll just show you all of that stuff in a minute. So there's lots of different ways that we can invite people to register for an event. When they do register for an event, we put them on an email list. There is a caveat to that. I'll show you in a minute. And then they end up in our CRM. I'll show you that as well. So I put them in as opportunities in the CRM. Now, to me, opportunity is just someone that I'm having a manual conversation with. You may do this differently. That's fine, because technically it's not an opportunity. You could do them as leads. You could not track them yet until they're an actual sales opportunity. But I like to put them in because those systems are designed for, like, opportunities are the things that you manually make notes on and follow up and all that sort of stuff. And I'm doing that to people. So you can do it manually. You can put everybody in automatically. This is part of however you choose to customize it. I used to do a lot of CRM consulting and automation and building and stuff, so I can deep dive on that topic. But yeah, also I do need to mention with the email list, when you register, in fact, I'll show you. Do I have a slide on that? Let me check. I do. Let me jump forward because I'll show you this. When you registered, you would have seen a box like this. This event organizer may use the above information to send communications about their offerings. The way I interpret this, and the way I've been doing this for years with 0 spam complaints, is if someone ticks this box, I add them to the general email list, ideally via an intro indoctrination type sequence. But even if you just add them to your broadcast list because you haven't built the other thing, that's totally fine. People expect that. And I'm finding about 40% of people tick this box. The people who don't tick this box, I still add them to the email list, but to this email autoresponder CRM. Sometimes they're the same thing, but I don't send them general stuff. I quarantine them and I only send them something about this particular event. So you would have all received email reminders of this event. You'll have received calendar invites, blah, blah, blah. I do that via email to improve the show-up rate, and I get 0 complaints doing it that way. I usually put a pre-header in. May not have done that for this event, again, because I was away. Don't know whether the team did it. But when I do it, I put a pre-header in and I say, hey, I'm not actually adding you to my email list. I'm just making sure that you see this because you registered for this thing. And again, no one complains. So that works really well. You can stretch it a little bit and invite people to similar events. So, for example, I'll send those people a recording. And if I was running the same event next week, I could also send those people an invite, even though they're not on the email list. Because it's like, hey, you registered for this thing. You missed it. I'm running it again. Like, to me, that's That's a pretty ethical thing to do. But everybody has their own line there, and we can customize that. Then I don't have time. Again, this will be a whole nother section, but to talk about the content approach here, the way I do it is systematized. And so we do this for people. This is a new part of what we're doing. I've obviously done this for myself and other people in the past, but in terms of like, this is part of the evolution of getting over some of those LinkedIn limits, is focusing more on an ecosystem, not just of events, but of content as well. And so previously I was leaving content to clients or ignoring content. And realistically, everybody kept asking me, like, what do I do with content? So it's like, okay, well, got to come up with some kind of answer. But the intention of this content, as I said, is not lead generation, it's lead nurture. So we take the full replay and we simply pull bits out of the replay and give them to you to use for content in various places. And the reason we do that, there's several reasons we do that. One is like, you don't really have to do anything. That's a pretty big, good reason. But the second reason is generally for most people hate content production, and they think of content production as this is what you should do. I've got to, like, in the content itself, I've got to do like, there's all sorts of objections, head trash, preparation, energy state, like all sorts of things. Most people hate it, frankly. But most people when I say most people, I mean that I work with and interact with, most people are good at something like this, or working with clients. And so if you take a client call, obviously notwithstanding permission and so on, which can be dealt with, or you take a call like this or a sales call or something, you can just pull bits out of it and use that as content, and then your content's done. And it's not just that it's done, which is obviously an efficiency point. It's you're doing something in your natural environment that you're good at, and then you capture that rather than setting yourself up for failure by doing something that you're not good at, which is content creation. It's also more authentic. So this is what we do. You'll be seeing a lot more of this coming out from us. But at a bare minimum, what I'll do is the full replay page. You'll get this as well. So you'll see an embedded video of this. So I had a bit of fluff at the beginning. I'm going to download it, cut that video, upload it to Vimeo or Wistia. We use, or the other one, can't remember. Don't even remember what I'm using. I think it's Wistia. I got all of these things. That's the problem. And yeah, embed that and then have an embedded call to action. So a button below it. This is very similar to on an email. If you're doing content via email or a post, but especially for email, the PS, you'll see that on mine as well. It won't go to those people. Yeah, I'll do a whole Joe, I'll do a whole separate thing on that tactically. But there's a lot of the short version is there's a lot of AI driven tools that you can feed a video and they'll just spit stuff out. You can also do it manually. I've historically done it manually, but I'm testing the AI tools. I don't completely trust them yet. I don't sort of trust AI in general, and I'm a computer scientist as well. So there's that. But yeah, so the CTA is what I call a soft CTA. So I'll send people the replay. The content will be talking about the replay, but then it's like, hey, like there's the replay. If you want to book a time to talk or whatever your next action is, that's there as an option. It's like in the email PS. PS, this is how you can work with us. I'm a big fan of those kind of things. Because what we're doing is this is to me a form of nurture where we're adding value. And then when people are ready, they raise their hand. Now, we still want to give them an opportunity to raise their hand. Like, we don't just want to sit back, and a lot of people do this and say, oh, I'm just going to deliver all this value into the market. But they never ask, they never give people that sort of next step, usually because they're scared of sales and scared of being rejected. So this is a great way of doing this like all the time, just to remind people with a very soft CDA. You also disperse that on other platforms. At a minimum, email your email list and LinkedIn. So in terms of email list, you can send people to a YouTube channel or another platform, a social platform, TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or whatever. That's fine. I wouldn't go out and start this stuff unless you're already doing it. If you're not already doing that, the easiest is to either create these pages because they're super easy to duplicate and then just put a different video in, which is great. Or you can even send people just a raw Loom video or Vimeo or Wistia if you want to as well, and just embed that. You can also do YouTube and have a private unlisted version as well. But I'm pretty sure YouTube adds into that, which I don't like. So that's why I use those other platforms, because I don't want my competitors being advertised in my content. So yeah, that's what we're doing there with the recording. You'll see a bit of that lately. And then after this, and then the continuous improvement loop this is what our team's really good at as well, is every single event we download all of the information and we look at how do we make, and we look at the conversations and the automations that are firing. How do we make target market improvements, messaging improvements, topic improvements, delivery improvements, process improvements, and we feed that into subsequent events, and then we repeat this. So what happens over time is a bunch of things. You build your connections on LinkedIn, you build your email list, and you also get a bit of a cycling effect. So all of these people, not I mean not all of them, but all of them are able to see your content. A percentage of them do. All of them are able to register for your events. A percentage of them do. And by doing this repeatedly in a way that is value driven and doesn't piss people off, you get a snowball effect. And so that's the beauty of it. So it's not just taking an existing audience and trying to like juice it, squeeze it. It's also bringing fresh blood into that audience as well. So the way I like to do the fresh blood is via an event invitation. The way I like to do an existing audience can frankly be anything. So just one small example is a value call, which is, I call that, it's the complete opposite of most people's sales calls. Let me help you by actually helping you, which is a phrase, Frank. Let me show I can help you by actually helping you. And so I don't have time to go into all of that. That's sort of part of my consulting playbook as well. But there's a lot of other things you can do, and you can almost do whatever you want. You can host a roundtable, you can do challenges, you can do all sorts of things. But the event invite I've found consistently for like 6 years is a very friendly cold traffic invite. And then what you're doing with the combination of the event and then the content, which we're bringing in here, is to move people closer into that center with know, like, and trust and buyer awareness and all these kind of things. But by doing it in this way, we're not pushing people. We're encouraging people. We're opening an invitation. We're letting people walk towards us while still going outbound. This is the beauty of it. Because normally people that want this kind of pulling in, this attraction energy, have to just focus on content marketing, which they hate, suck at, and just statistically fail at. Whereas this approach is really the best of both worlds. All right, so I promised some tactics. I'm going to, some of these invites. Yeah, okay, I will talk about this one, which is, so when it comes to an event invite, obviously you've seen this particular event on LinkedIn. I'll show you an example of another event in a minute. Just got to switch my screen. But this is something I found, when you are promoting an event to traffic outside of LinkedIn, I have found sending the traffic to LinkedIn sucks. Just, I don't know exactly why. It used to be because if you weren't logged into LinkedIn when you sent the traffic, it 404'd, like it was an error page, and then you had to link in and then re-click that, like that was part of it. But it still, relatively speaking, sucks because it's not an optimized experience. So this is still where, the idea of a funnel is not a bad idea. We just need to, there's a time and a place for it. And so for an event registration, and you'll see this with the next event that I run in a couple of weeks, but if anyone's interested in an example of this, feel free, and I'll just send you a different one. But I'm not going to do it now because I don't have it loaded. But essentially, it's a very simple opt-in page and a thank you page. That's it. So it's very easy to build these things. It's very able to duplicate these things and change the event title, that kind of thing. So yeah, you do end up with a web-based funnel. And so you either need to build this or get someone on your team to build it, or we'll build it if you have traffic from somewhere else. And so you are going to get traffic from somewhere else by virtue of doing this, even just on LinkedIn natively, because every time you're going to be generating new leads. And so, yeah, okay, they came from LinkedIn. You can also just message them. So this is sort of a bit of a tailoring. Like if we're going to do it, we're going to build a web-based funnel every time, and we're going to invite the people via email every time because it's like a good system and process and it snowballs. You may choose not to do that. If you don't have an email list at all, and you're only relying on the one that you're generating, and you've got 20 people on an email list, it's not really going to be worth, say, from the first event that gave you permission to contact them about the next one, 30 people, whatever it is. Okay, at what point is it really worth this overhead of having all of this web stuff and modify? That's up to you. Because, for example, with the replay, you don't have to embed it in a web page. You can just bloody send them the link via email. You don't even need to have an email autoresponder. You could download the event list. I could show you that in a minute. CSV, you can integrate it into something like GMass, where you just send bulk emails from your personal email. That's it. So there are technological ways of doing this that are very, very lightweight. GMASS is probably the best. GMASS.co, I think it is, but you can search it. It's kind of like a quasi CRM that sits in. Sorry, Streak is another quasi CRM. It is a CRM that sits in Gmail. That's another one if you don't want a proper CRM. But GMASS is for sending bulk personalized stuff. So the hi David, hi John, hi blah. You can do a lot more with it, but just very basically doing that, you could download, upload the CSV into GMASS, hit your event invitation, hit your event replay, and do all of this without a marketing automation or system or CRM. So it can be very, very lightweight. Similarly, with the event funnel, if you've only got a very, very small email list and you send an invitation, like 20% of people will probably open it, 20% will click through, 30 to 70% of those, or 30 to 60% will register for the event. So there is a bit of a numbers game there. Like if you've only got 50 people on an email list, I wouldn't do that at all. I just actually, and part of the connection and engagement, firstly, if you've only got 50 people on an email list, I would have a conversation with every single one. But in terms of inviting to an event, I'd get them to reply and I'd register them manually. So because it's more connection, it's higher yield. So if you ask someone, all they need to do is just like reply yes. It's like, yeah, great. So we don't have to build funnels. We do because we're also looking for scalability over time. So anyway, that's just a little hint. So when people do, so one of the big advantages as well to people registering for a web funnel, and next time I do this, obviously I'll have the example preloaded, is get their phone number. So you can choose to make this a mandatory field or not. Done both, you definitely decrease the conversion rate by insisting on the phone number, but you can also then SMS people, which will increase the show up rate, and you can also text them manually. So it depends. It depends if you're going to do anything with that. If you're going to use their phone number because you might want to give them a call, then it's going to be, my suggestion would be it's worth insisting on having it because of the higher yield and efficiency that you're going to get out of the system. But I'm a big fan of an email reminder sequence, an SMS reminder sequence, and an automatic calendar invitation, which for various reasons was probably wrong for you guys, but that's the first time we've ever got it wrong. So there you go. But I'll show you all of that. And then over here, we've got, so to a LinkedIn event itself, you've got the bits on LinkedIn, new connections, emails, native event invitations and posts. And then to the web-based funnel, your email list, any other social platforms, like you wouldn't be sending traffic from Facebook to LinkedIn, doesn't really make any sense to me. But LinkedIn is great as well, like as opposed to say running an event on Facebook as well, because you get the email list from it and you get the connection from it, and it's not filtered anywhere near as much as activity on the Facebook platform. You've also got your SMS invitations that would go here, and any referral partner and affiliate, email marketing, that kind of stuff. So that's the overview of the system. I'm going to just jump tactically into a couple of things to show you. This is the, and I could show you this live, it's just more efficient to show you the screenshot. When you set up an event on LinkedIn, this is how you can invite people. You can invite 1,000 of these people a week, and you get very limited filtering on this. This only works for your first degree connection. So this is one of the things you want to do. A lot of you would have got it that way, and that pops up as a notification. This is one way. So just whatever you're doing, if you create an event, invite 1,000 people to it if you have the space. We talked about that one. Okay, I am now going to jump over to here. This is for Sales Navigator. So I've got an example. This is LinkedIn. You need to pay for this. Do pay for this. I'm not going to say any more about that. So here's an example of how I can find consultants, and I'm just looking at my other screen over there, that meet my criteria. So company headcount, something to note about company headcount is this is pretty unreliable. So what I'm usually doing here is I'm looking at this number over here, and I loaded this a while ago. So 1,000 plus results. So ideally, this is a whole separate conversation, but this can't be too big and can't be too small. If that's at 100,000, I need to narrow it down. It depends how many people you're going to outreach to and how many, how far in advance you're going to do that. So for an individual event, about 1,000 results is kind of fine because you can't send that many messages this way. So that's fine. But I'm going to run out of that 1,000 at some point, and so I'm going to have to change my criteria. So if I look through at this criteria, well, this one, for example, is only targeting California. Well, that's a very easy way. I can just start targeting other states. Over here, it's targeting 1 to 10. So I can make it target self-employed or 51 to 200, and that's going to increase. But similarly, if I start there and this number is too high, I actually want to tighten the criteria so I get more relevant people. Some of this, like for example, the state, like the only reason I'm putting California in there is time zone. So there's plenty of other places I can do that as well. So it's not going to affect my quality, but going here, it may affect my quality because I may start getting, well, I will start getting more people that are in the wrong target demographic, for example. So here, owner, CEO, again, I can add director, I can add partner, I can add VP. This depends on country as well. For example, Australia, director, it's sort of more senior than in the United States, all this kind of stuff. Industry, again, there's lots of different those. And this is a key filtering one, second degree connections. If you do that, you are going to get more responsiveness. But if I remove it, I've now got 3 times as many results. So this is all a trade-off. Tactically, this is just, okay, do I want this to be smaller or bigger? And obviously, as I make it smaller, I can make it more relevant. So second degree, people will see on LinkedIn that you are a second degree, so you're just going to get more responsiveness. Similarly here, posted on LinkedIn is a great way of knowing that people are responsive on the platform. This limits your set drastically in some audiences, but possibly terminally. But the person is active on LinkedIn if they've been posting, because most people don't post. So that's a really good one. You can also click see all filters and start to do all sorts of other things as well. So years of experience, you can go through all this. I don't need to talk about all of them. The posts on LinkedIn one that's really interesting. The other thing that's really interesting is shared experiences. You can also do individual connection, like if you really want to. Group members, for example. So if you join a bunch of groups, you used to be able to message people once you joined groups and events. You can't do that as much anymore. That's where the majority of the volume reduction went. But you can still do shared experiences and you can still do connections via a group. So join relevant groups, frankly, not even if you're not going to post on groups, you're not going to scout on groups. Almost nobody really looks at the LinkedIn feed that significantly. Join them though, because it gives the system a really good signal as to who you want. So don't join groups about who you are. Join groups that contain your ideal target market. Now, sometimes they don't let you in because it's like, okay, I'm working with accountants and they have groups that only let accountants in. Okay, well, maybe you can't do that with everything, but as much as you can do that. And so shared experiences, I believe, also includes events. There used to be an explicit way of targeting your competitors' event traffic that also no longer works, but this one will still get it. So if you register for events on the platform and join groups, you're gonna do pretty well. And then within here, and you can automate all of this using heaps of tools. Duck Soup is one. We use Linked Helper. You send someone a message, and I've got examples of this as well. So half of you will have received that. So I won't go into that too much. Here's an example of the messaging event description. Again, you can sort of pause and screenshot that type of stuff. You can also just simply look at the events that we've got. That stuff's pretty basic. The event invitations, it's all pretty basic. It's like, hey, this is what we're going to talk about. Here's the benefit, blah, blah, blah. Here's a reminder. Like, it's not that, there's a post. Like, frankly, like full transparency, you could ask ChatGPT to do this shit. It's not special. So here's an example of another event. I'm on the admin interface of this. So you can see here, when I go to manage, I can download registration info. And that's going to give me everybody's name and email and that consent box. We actually automate this, but you don't have to. At the end of the event, you could just go download, do the thing I talked about. You could upload it into your CRM. You could upload it in GMAS and send people emails. You just add them to your contact book and then start contacting people on email manually as well. Because remember, this sort of permission applies to bulk email. Like if you're doing this for someone that's registered and you're personally sending them a personal one-off email, nobody's going to complain about that, having registered for an event. If you scrape their email off LinkedIn, you will get a significant percentage of complaints. A lot of people still have like their family or their personal or some kind of ISP email address tied to their LinkedIn account, especially people like me or older, because we've had LinkedIn for so long. So that I found pisses people off. I stopped doing that about 10 years ago. But yeah, so that's how you can do that. What we do instead is use Zapier. Again, Zapier has its own AI. You can chat GPT this shit. What we're looking for is people who register. We then create a webinar registrant in Zoom. That is only needed if you're using Zoom webinar. If you're using Zoom meeting, it's the same URL every time. You don't need that shit. Then we're adding to them to the CRM, and then we're creating the detailed calendar event. This helps show up the show up rate considerably. I'm a little hack. This is totally tactical, but I'm doing this on a separate calendar. The reason, so it can be a separate user account, but in Google Calendar, it can be a separate calendar. You can create multiple calendars down the left in Google, and you turn all the notifications off. So this is why I do it, because as I said, I had about 75 people register for this event. I don't want like 100 emails with calendar acceptances and rejected and tentative and out of office replies and all that kind of crap. So I just literally do them on a separate calendar. I also don't want to see all this stuff on my primary calendar. Like I've already blocked it out. I don't need all of this stuff. So that's a nice little hack. And it works really, really well. I've shown that to some people that are pretty advanced at webinars, and they do this and they get a show up rate increase that's fairly drastic. Here's an example. I've obviously got a screenshot of it because I blurred it all out for privacy reasons, but this is what we're doing in terms of a CRM for a particular event. So this is Go High Level. We provide that for clients, but you can see I'm using opportunities. And this was one where for this particular offer, we were calling people who registered. There's a bunch of reasons we're doing that there. And so we had pipeline stages that were set to that. You would set the pipeline stages to what you want. Now, we're automating that. You don't have to automate it. So for example, if you may just keep conversations in the inbox and not add them to the CRM until a certain point. That's a whole nother topic, and that's all totally fine. The other thing in terms of email sequence, this is for show up, the reminder sequence, super, super simple. So you can see here, we're creating the opportunity manually, automatically. Delete that if you don't want to do it that way. And then we're just sending a series of emails. Email, wait, email, wait, email, wait. And that's it. So very, very basic. And again, you don't have to do it that way. So that's sort of the end of the tactics. As I said, I'll go deep on this in a separate presentation. I'm assuming most people are not personally going to do this. So either, yeah, if you want to get your team to like steal what we're doing, come along to one of those future events. That's fine. Grab the recording, do whatever you want. If you want us to do it, that's also totally fine. So you can do it yourself, take this strategy, apply it to your own relationship generation efforts, take our LinkedIn approach, do whatever you want. Obviously, you could also leverage our proven process and team. We do things done for you. We run the data-driven feedback loops. The thing is scalable across multiple traffic sources and within each traffic source in terms of additional volume. And you get to focus on your zone of genius. Also, if it's not for you, or even if it is, but you think it's going to be good for your clients, we do have a partner program, so we can talk about that. But I promised you that wasn't even 30 seconds. So yeah, any questions at this point? Yeah, thank you, Arled. I know I went way over, but I was having too much fun. So that's funny. Anyway, appreciate all the positive comments. There's a bunch of people who did need to leave in the last half hour. So hopefully, hi, thank you for coming back to the replay. If that's you, if anyone wants to ask anything before I disappear, I've got about 5 minutes, but then I'm going to jump off because I've got to check out of this hotel before they start coming knocking. So how much does the service cost? We're going to get into that because it depends. But the short version is if you get one client a month, you're more than paid for it for most people. 99, anyone I'm going to work with, that's true. And yeah, so that's a whole conversation. I also have multiple offers that are for different people depending on where they're at. And there's other ways of maybe doing this after doing something else. So happy to have a conversation about that. Can you train our marketing team? Yeah, that's fine. I'm not precious about this kind of stuff. Yeah, so just at a philosophical level, the way I think about something like this is anyone could actually take what we're doing as a slice in time and implement it themselves. And in fact, years ago, I licensed some of the IP around what we were doing on LinkedIn at the time from somebody else who was doing exactly this as a one-time thing. So I have no problem on that. The value proposition that I focus on in terms of ongoing retention is not based on like hiding anything. It's not based on any kind of point of leverage. It's based on delivering continual value. So how do we deliver continual value? Well, obviously one element is done for you. Most people don't want to manage this shit. That's fine. If you've got a team, you want to manage this shit. Well, that's probably not a point of ongoing value, right? The other component is the continuous improvement loops. And so, yeah, if we were training your team, I would be training them not just on setting this stuff up, but also on doing that data-driven analysis. So that's totally fine. But yeah, like for me personally, I'm happy to do that because there's only so many people we can work with, and I don't want to have an ongoing relationship where there's not ongoing value. So yeah, I'm more than happy with one-off stuff. Most people though, this is intended as a longer term thing, and yeah, continual improvement. But what happens as well, I mean, I'm open, it's a full spectrum, because some people go, yeah, actually, I got enough, or it depends on your business model as well. And I'm not talking to you specifically, Joe, but it's like a lot of people, like they retain clients for so long. It's like they want to do this for a period of time and then they've got kind of enough clients and then they leave. So yeah, I'm open to all of those possibilities. Any other questions before I jump off? All right, cool. Thank you for those, which is about 55, 60% that stuck with me way over time, the entire time. We were doing really well for retention at the actual scheduled end of this event. So once I go well past what I talked about, I don't blame people for jumping off. So thank you all for your attention and great questions. I'll connect with all of you after to make sure I can serve you in the best way. And yeah, look out for future invites. I'll be diving deep and also talking about other things because as I've sort of alluded to, I've got a consulting business for financial services stuff, probably partially relevant to some of you, but the consulting side is based on optimizing what you already had. So this today was all about new stuff, but I'm also, yeah, there's a lot of stuff I got to say around optimizing what you've already got, which is another fun topic. So stay tuned. We'll connect. Chat soon.